Instruction. You stand at a quiet threshold, though nothing around you appears to have changed. The room is the same, the light familiar, the air still. Yet something has shifted beneath the surface, like a floorboard that creaks under a step you did not intend to take. You feel it as a pressure without shape, a question without language. It does not demand your attention. It waits. You have known this feeling before, perhaps late at night, perhaps in the early morning when the world is still undecided. A subtle sense that something within you has been watching for a long time, patient, alert, unmoved by your explanations. It does not speak yet. It breathes, and its breathing begins to set the rhythm of your own. There is a door here, though you cannot say where it stands. You only know that you have been standing before it longer than you remember. You were busy. You were moving forward, or sideways, or simply enduring. Still, the door remained. Now it feels closer, not because you approached it, but because it leaned toward you. You sense a quiet rupture. Not a collapse, not a crisis. More like a hairline crack in a surface that once felt solid. Through that narrow opening, something presses upward. Images you did not invite. Feelings without names. A heaviness that does not belong to sadness, and a brightness that does not promise relief. You are not afraid yet. You are unsettled, which is different. A mirror flickers somewhere in the dark. You do not see your face in it, only movement, as if something behind your reflection has begun to stir. You look away instinctively, then notice that the looking away changes nothing. Whatever is there remains. It does not chase you. It does not retreat. You feel the old habit of explanation rise up, ready to soothe, ready to organize. It offers familiar phrases, borrowed certainties, a map that once worked well enough. But the pressure does not ease. The map grows thin in your hands, like paper left too long in water. You realize that this moment does not want to be understood. It wants to be entered. A forest appears at the edge of your awareness. Not a place you remember visiting, but one you recognize all the same. Dense, quiet, alive. The path into it is narrow, almost invisible, as if it forms only when you take a step. You hesitate. Not from fear of danger, but from a deeper resistance, the kind that knows something will be asked of you that cannot be returned unchanged. Your breath slows. The silence thickens. Somewhere, a low flame begins to glow, red and steady, offering just enough light to reveal how little you can see. You sense that what lies ahead is not a lesson, not a healing, not a victory. It is a meeting. And without deciding, without agreeing, you find that you are already standing closer to the door than before. You step through without marking the moment of crossing. There is no sound, no shift of air, yet everything rearranges itself around you. The light dims, not as a threat, but as an invitation to notice what has always been there. The forest closes in, not hostile, not welcoming. It simply exists, breathing at its own pace, indifferent to your need for orientation. Figures begin to move at the edges of your vision. They do not announce themselves. They do not carry names. You feel them as tensions in the body before they become images. A tightening in the chest, a warmth behind the eyes, a weight in the limbs that does not come from fatigue. These presences do not ask who you are. They behave as if they already know. A river runs nearby, though you cannot see its source. You hear it first, a low continuous sound, like thought before language. It carries reflections instead of answers. When you approach, the surface does not mirror your face. It shows fragments, a hand reaching, a child standing still, a figure turned away at the moment you needed it to stay. The water does not accuse. It remembers. You sense a pull toward the depths, not downward in space, but inward in meaning. This is not a descent you choose. It unfolds as recognition. You realize that much of what you called forward motion was a careful circling around this place. Every certainty, every identity you carried like a shield, was shaped to avoid standing here too long. A fire burns at the center of a clearing. Its flame is low, red, contained. It does not leap or spread. It consumes slowly, patiently. When you draw near, you notice that it gives off little heat, yet something in you begins to warm. Old defenses soften. The fire does not destroy. It exposes. You see how much effort went into keeping this flame small, hidden, manageable. Shadows gather around the fire, cast not by the flame itself, but by the figures standing between you and it. These shapes feel familiar. Pride without confidence, desire without direction, fear dressed as reason. They do not block your way. They stand close, as if waiting to be acknowledged rather than removed. You sense that pushing past them would only deepen their hold. A voice speaks, though not from any single mouth. It carries the tone of long familiarity, neither kind nor cruel. It does not instruct. It asks why you believed you could remain untouched by what lives within you. The question lands without judgment. You feel its weight settle into places you have avoided feeling before. You remember moments when something inside you stirred and you turned away. Times when an image arose and you named it distraction, fantasy, weakness. The forest seems to listen as you remember. The trees lean inward slightly, as if drawn by the honesty of attention rather than the content of thought. A mirror appears again, this time standing upright among the roots. You approach it slowly. The surface ripples, refusing stillness. When an image forms, it is not a single face but a sequence. You see yourself as you have been at different thresholds, choosing familiarity over truth, certainty over depth. None of the images linger long enough to become accusations. They pass like weather. You feel a presence beside you now. It does not touch you. Its nearness is enough. You sense intelligence without intention, awareness without demand. This presence does not claim authority. It simply watches with you. You realize that this is what has been missing, not guidance, but witness. The river sounds closer now. You notice that its flow carries fragments of language, not words, but rhythms of meaning. You feel how thought arises like a current, how easily you once mistook its movement for yourself. Here, thought becomes something you can observe, something that moves through rather than defines you. A temple emerges at the far edge of the clearing. Its columns are worn, ancient, neither grand nor ruined. You feel no urge to enter it. Its purpose is not sanctuary. It stands as a reminder that something within you has always known how to hold opposites without forcing resolution. The fire flickers. The shadows shift. Nothing concludes. Nothing resolves. Yet something deepens. You sense that this descent is not about losing yourself, but about discovering how much of you was never yours to control. The presence beside you remains silent. The forest breathes. The river flows. And you stand there, no longer waiting for meaning to arrive from elsewhere, beginning to sense how meaning forms when you stay. You remain where you are, though the sense of stillness begins to feel active, almost deliberate. The forest no longer presses in. It listens. The air carries a density that makes every breath feel noticed. You realize that something in you has stopped leaning forward. There is no reaching now, only a sustained attention that feels unfamiliar and strangely intimate. The presence beside you shifts, not in space, but in quality. It feels closer without moving. You sense that it is not here to protect you or correct you. It stands as a reminder that whatever unfolds belongs to you, even if it did not originate from your will. This recognition brings a quiet unease. You have learned to value what you can claim as yours. Here, ownership loosens. An image rises without warning. You see yourself standing before another mirror, long ago. The mirror was clear then, obedient. It showed you what you expected to see. You remember the relief of recognition, the comfort of alignment. That mirror required maintenance, polishing, adjustment, small lies told gently enough to sound like truth. You see now how much energy went into keeping the reflection stable. The forest answers this memory with another image. A door half open, light spilling unevenly across the ground. You did not walk through it then. You stood close, convincing yourself that proximity was enough. You can feel the sensation in your body even now, the subtle tightening that came with staying just outside what you sensed would change you. The river carries a new reflection. This time it shows movement without form. Ripples crossing ripples. No center. No edge. You sense how often you tried to stabilize what was never meant to be held still. How you named fluidity as confusion and fixedness as clarity. The water does not resist your gaze. It invites it, showing you how perception itself bends what it touches. A warmth spreads slowly through your chest, not comforting, not painful. It feels like exposure. You notice how instinctively you search for interpretation, for language that could turn sensation into certainty. None arrives. The absence feels intentional. You begin to understand that this space is not withholding meaning. It is asking you to meet meaning before it becomes explanation. The fire shifts color slightly, deepening into a darker red. You notice how the shadows respond, growing softer at their edges. Pride loosens its posture. Fear no longer hides behind logic. Desire stops pulling and begins to wait. These figures do not dissolve. They change relationship. You sense how they have been asking for this all along, not to be conquered, but to be seen without demand. A memory surfaces, not as a scene, but as a tone. The feeling of wanting something you could not justify. Longing that felt dangerous because it did not come with instructions. You remember how quickly you learned to replace longing with ambition, hunger with goals. The forest seems to hold this memory gently, without praise or blame. You feel the presence beside you turn its attention inward, as if inviting you to do the same. Not to analyze, not to correct, but to notice how often you confused movement with progress. How often you mistook noise for life. Here, nothing urges you forward. The stillness itself begins to feel like motion of a different kind. The temple in the distance catches a faint glow now, reflecting the fire rather than producing its own light. You see how structures of meaning are formed this way, not as sources, but as containers. You have entered many temples in your life, literal and symbolic. You recognize now how easily you handed over your attention, hoping the structure would relieve you of listening to what stirred within. The mirror among the roots reflects again. This time it shows your eyes, not as you see them, but as they feel from the inside. Watching, waiting, you sense how rarely you allowed them to rest in this way. How often you forced them outward, scanning for confirmation, for threat, for permission. Nothing resolves, yet something steadies. You feel a subtle shift, not toward certainty, but toward endurance. The ability to remain present without needing to name what is happening. The forest breathes with you. The river continues. The fire holds its flame. And you begin to sense that this is not a moment to pass through, but a field to inhabit. The field holds you longer than you expected. Time loosens its grip here, not dissolving, but thinning, like fog under steady breath. You notice how quickly you once measured experience by outcome, by what could be taken away and used. Here, nothing offers itself in that way. Meaning does not present itself as a tool. It behaves more like weather, surrounding you, entering you, leaving traces without explanation. The presence beside you feels less distinct now. Not gone, not merged, simply less separate. You sense how easily you once demanded clarity from anything that approached you from within. A name, a role, a function. Without these, you felt unmoored. Now you begin to feel how naming can become a form of distance, a way of standing just far enough away to remain untouched. The river shifts again. Its sound deepens, slower, heavier. You realize that it has been carrying not only images, but refusals. Moments when you chose not to know what you sensed. When you turned intuition into coincidence, warning into doubt. The water does not reproach you. It shows you the cost quietly, how each refusal thickened the boundary between what you lived and what lived through you. A figure emerges near the fire, not fully formed, more suggestion than shape. You recognize it without understanding how. It carries the weight of choices you did not make, words you swallowed before they reached the air. It does not accuse. Its presence alone is enough to stir a familiar discomfort, the kind you once rushed to silence with action or explanation. You feel the old impulse rise again, the urge to move toward resolution. To do something that would justify this depth, give it a narrative arc. The forest responds by growing quieter. The silence does not cooperate. It waits. You feel how this waiting stretches something inside you that has long been contracted. A door appears where there was none before, set into the trunk of an ancient tree. It stands open. Darkness beyond it is complete, not threatening, simply uninterested in your readiness. You sense that stepping through would not bring revelation, only further encounter. You remain where you are. The door does not close. It respects your hesitation as much as it would your courage. The fire flickers, then steadies. You notice how it mirrors something within you, a capacity to hold tension without discharge, to remain with contradiction without forcing synthesis. You remember how often you were praised for decisiveness, for clarity, for certainty. You see now how those virtues sometimes served as armor, keeping you from feeling the full weight of what you sensed but could not control. A thought passes through you like a bird crossing the clearing. You watch it come and go. There is relief in this distance, but also sadness. You recognize how deeply you once believed that you were your thoughts, that their urgency was your own. Here, thought becomes event rather than identity. Something that happens in you, not something that defines you. The mirror reflects again, but this time it shows nothing recognizable. Only light shifting across surface. You feel a moment of unease, the fear of vanishing, of becoming irrelevant. Then another sensation follows, quieter, steadier. The relief of not needing to perform coherence, of being allowed to exist without explanation. The temple's columns cast long shadows now, stretching toward you. They do not reach you. They gesture. You sense how meaning structures have always arisen around experiences like this, not to replace them, but to make them bearable. Stories, symbols, systems, useful, necessary, but never the source itself. The presence that once stood beside you now feels like it stands behind you, not guiding, not pushing, simply there. You sense that this presence has always been with you, obscured only by noise, by haste, by the constant demand to become something definite. You breathe. The forest breathes back. The river continues its slow remembering. The fire holds. Nothing is resolved. Yet you feel something deepen again, a second turning of the same spiral, drawing you closer to a center that refuses to be named. The spiral tightens without urgency. You feel it not as pressure, but as proximity, like standing closer to a quiet animal that knows you are there. The forest seems less like a place now, and more like a state of listening. Every sound arrives softened, as if passing through layers of attention before reaching you. You sense how much of your life was lived without this filter, everything striking at once, demanding reaction. A subtle fatigue moves through you, not of the body, but of the effort to remain intact. You notice how often you held yourself together through force, through repetition of familiar gestures and explanations. Here, holding together feels unnecessary. The parts you feared would scatter remain present, gathered not by will, but by gravity. The river's surface smooths for a moment. In that stillness, you see a reflection that surprises you. Not an image of who you were or who you wanted to be, but of who you have been avoiding. A figure standing quietly at the edge of your awareness, patient, enduring. You recognize the posture. It is the way you stood when no one was watching, when expectation loosened its grip. This recognition brings a gentle ache. Not regret, not loss, but the awareness of time spent elsewhere. You feel the urge to apologize, though you are not sure to whom. The feeling passes. The river does not need reconciliation. It continues to flow, carrying both absence and return without distinction. The fire dims slightly, then brightens again. You sense how easily intensity can be mistaken for truth. How often you chased flames that promised transformation through heat alone. This fire teaches differently. It does not overwhelm. It persists. It asks for presence rather than sacrifice. A breath moves through you that feels deeper than intention. You realize that something in you has begun to trust this space, not because it offers safety, but because it does not deceive. Nothing here pretends to be more than it is. Nothing asks you to become more than you can hold. The mirror appears one last time. Its surface is clear now, almost ordinary. When you look, you see yourself looking. The simplicity feels startling. No symbols intrude. No narratives arise. Just awareness meeting itself without commentary. The moment does not last. It does not need to. The temple recedes into the background, not disappearing, but losing its claim on your attention. You sense that you may return to it later, carrying what you have gathered here without knowing what it is. The structure will still be there, waiting to receive meaning after it has lived in you for a while. A quiet understanding settles, not as conclusion, but as alignment. You are not here to extract insight, to convert experience into certainty. You are here to learn how to remain when clarity withdraws, how to listen when nothing speaks, how to stand at the edge of what you do not know without turning away. The presence behind you feels steady. It does not merge with you. It does not separate. It accompanies. You sense how accompaniment differs from guidance, how it allows you to walk without being led. This feels important, though you cannot say why. The forest exhales. The river continues its remembering. The fire holds its low red glow. You feel yourself standing within the same field as before, yet changed by repetition, by staying. The spiral does not close. It opens inward, inviting you to remain a little longer, attentive to what cannot be claimed, only lived. Something gathers now, not as intensity, but as coherence. The field you stand in begins to feel less diffuse, as if the many strands that have moved around you are slowly finding a shared rhythm. Nothing is pulled together by force. It happens the way breath settles when you stop trying to regulate it. You notice the shift only after it has already begun. The forest no longer feels external. You sense it as a texture of awareness, layered, responsive, alive. The trees are no longer images, but presences that mirror an inner condition you rarely allowed to mature. A patience that does not wait for reward. A strength that does not announce itself. You feel how this quality has always existed in you, obscured not by weakness, but by haste. The river flows through you now, not symbolically, but experientially. Thoughts move the way water does here, arising, passing, reshaping the ground without asking permission. You sense how much energy you once spent trying to dam this movement, to redirect it into channels that promised control. The effort feels distant now, almost unnecessary. You do not need to stop the river to know it. The fire's glow reaches deeper, illuminating spaces you once associated only with tension or guilt. These areas soften, not because they are forgiven, but because they are finally included. You feel how exclusion was the true burden, how pushing parts of yourself into shadow required constant vigilance. Inclusion feels quieter, more demanding in its own way. It asks you to stay present rather than victorious. You sense the ego here, not as an enemy, not as a ruler, but as a listener learning a new posture. It no longer stands at the center issuing commands. It orients itself toward what arises, curious, cautious, receptive. This shift feels subtle, yet profound. You realize that nothing has been taken from you. Authority has simply changed tone. Images return, but altered by the time spent with them. The door in the tree remains open, but no longer pulls at you. The mirror reflects without urgency. The temple stands without invitation. Each symbol feels less like a destination and more like a companion, something you can pass by without abandoning, return to without obligation. A warmth spreads again through your chest, steadier this time. It does not demand expression. It does not seek discharge. It feels like alignment, the quiet satisfaction of parts no longer pulling in opposite directions. Conflict remains, but it has changed shape. It is no longer a battle. It is a conversation that continues even when no words are spoken. You feel the weight of your history differently now. Memories do not press forward seeking resolution. They settle into place, forming a landscape rather than a narrative. You sense how the past lives in you not as a problem to solve, but as material already transformed by attention. Nothing needs to be erased for this to happen. Nothing needs to be redeemed. The presence that has accompanied you feels fully integrated now, though it never announces itself as such. You sense that it was never separate from you, only waiting for the noise to subside enough to be felt. This recognition does not inflate you. It grounds you. You feel smaller in the way a stone feels small in a river, shaped by forces larger than itself, yet undeniably real. The forest grows quieter, not because it withdraws, but because you no longer strain to hear it. The river's sound becomes part of your own inner cadence. The fire remains low and constant, a reminder that transformation does not require spectacle, only continuity. Nothing culminates. Nothing resolves. Yet you feel a deepening sense of coherence, as if the many fragments of your experience have learned how to share the same space without canceling one another. You stand within this quiet intensity, aware that this is not an end, but a way of standing that can be carried forward without being possessed. You remain here, though the sense of here has softened. It is no longer bound to forest or fire or river. It lives as a quality of attention that follows you without effort. You notice how easily it settles now, how it no longer needs the density of image to stay present. The symbols recede not because they are finished, but because they trust you to carry their resonance without display. The silence feels fuller than before. Not empty, not expectant. It holds the weight of everything that has passed through you and continues to move. You sense how this silence is not an absence of sound, but a space where sound no longer competes for dominance. Thoughts still arise. Feelings still move. None of them demand to be believed. The forest breathes somewhere within your chest. You recognize it when you pause between impulses, when you allow a moment to unfold without steering it. The river flows through your awareness, carrying impressions, memories, intuitions, none of them asking to be kept. You feel how much lighter this movement is when you no longer cling to what passes. The fire remains as a quiet ember. It does not flare. It does not fade. It reminds you that attention itself transforms, not by force, but by staying. You sense how easily you once sought intensity as proof of truth. Now truth feels closer to steadiness, to the ability to remain with what is unresolved without turning away. The presence you felt throughout does not depart. It does not linger dramatically either. It simply continues, woven into your perception. You sense it when you notice yourself noticing, when awareness folds back on itself without collapse. This is not mastery. It is relationship. Nothing in you rushes to name what has happened. Language feels unnecessary, even intrusive. You allow the experience to remain unclaimed, knowing that claiming would shrink it. Meaning will arrive later, in fragments, in unexpected moments, shaped by living rather than reflection. You sense that this dialogue does not end when the images fade. It continues in the way you listen to yourself when no one else is watching, in how you meet confusion without immediately trying to resolve it, in how you allow contradiction to exist without turning it into error. The threshold you cross does not close behind you. It does not remain open either. It dissolves into something more subtle, a way of standing, a way of breathing, a way of remaining in contact with what moves beneath thought. You are not finished. Nothing has been completed, and yet something essential has been allowed to remain present. The forest is still there. The river continues. The fire holds. And the listening goes on quietly without end.